Assalamu alaikum. Shalom aleichem. She do it the other way. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Irini mazisu. Pax vobiscum. Peace be unto you. Welcome back. We're looking at Ruth Chapter 2. And there are 23 verses. Beginning in verse 1, we see here Naomi. The relationship between Naomi and Boaz was not just one of bloodline relatives, but he actually was a friend of hers, an acquaintance. So they have a mutual understanding, a friendship, even. And then, as well, actually, okay, I'm going to mention this as well. In the Masoretic, it adds that he's a man of wealth. So that's an interesting addition. Not saying he's not wealthy, but that's an insertion. In verse 2, we have a footnote regarding with whomsoever I shall find favor. And that's the footnote says here in the Greek, in whosoever eyes I shall find favor. So this seems to be more specific to somebody who's meeting Ruth, has no prior knowledge of her character, and so she's going to gain favor at a glance. So with their eyes, not just favor, in a vague way, but because she makes a good impression on them. And I'm saying, in my interpretation anyway, she's making a good first impression to whoever she's going to be working for. And so, yes, making a good first impression and finding favor in their eyes. Okay, so in verse 7, skipping ahead, we have a significant difference. It says here, talking about Ruth, she rested not even a little in the field. Okay, so we can see there's a significant difference, because in the Masoretic, she actually is taking a break. Where is she and what is she doing? Well, she's in the house, not out in the field. And she's waiting. She's just taking a break. She's not working anyhow. But in the Septuagint, she's not in the house. She's in the field. And she worked from morning till evening, not resting even a little, not even a little bit. Verse 9. So we can see she's a workhorse. Verse 9 says, behold, I have charged the young men not to touch you. Okay, no hanky-panky there. Verses, have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch you? So we have an assuring statement here in the Septuagint versus a rhetorical question. So a lot more confidence in the Septuagint. The way it's verbalized, the way it's stated. Verse 10, notice, you should take notice of me versus take knowledge of me. So one is recognizing her. I should say they're both recognizing her, because I look at the Hebrew word for this, nakar, is to recognize and respect. So she's being recognized. There are multiple connotations for this word. But if you're just taking it at face value, it's not just knowing her, it's really taking notice of her. Verse 11 says, told, it has been, this is Boaz speaking to Ruth, it has fully been told me, versus showed me. And that Hebrew word is nagad, which is to manifest, to announce, to explain, which is, again, it is very close in meaning. Verse 13, it says here, kindly. You have spoken kindly versus friendly. And we have a footnote here. for this word. In the Greek, it means to the heart of. You've spoken to the heart of, which is a Hebraism, a Hebraic idiom or statement. You've spoken to the heart of your handmaid. So we can see the connection being made there, that he's really connecting. Boaz means for wine. Boaz is really connecting with Ruth on an emotional level. Okay, we have a big difference. Our first one in the whole book, it says, "And behold, I shall be as one of your servants." We can see the dynamic here, and her humbling herself, saying, "I shall be as one of your servants." She's humbling herself before Boaz and respecting his authority. And that's a verbal confirmation of her accepting that, or proposing it anyway. In the Masoretic, she says it this way, "Though I be not like unto one of your handmaidens." So we can see this verse 13. This is actually Ruth's response to verse 8. And what is verse 8? The question there. Boaz said to Ruth, "Have you not heard, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field. And don't leave here," just rewording it, "join yourself here with my damsels." So, have you not heard, my daughter? That's the question. So join my damsels, join his female servants, essentially. And her answer in verse 13 is, "I shall. I'll join them. I'll be as one of your servants." In the Masoretic, she's not answering that question. She's saying, she's talking about her, that she's different. She's talking about herself. So she's sort of pointing out she's different. Sounds a little bit like victim mentality. "I'm different than your handmaidens." Why is she saying this? Unknown. Maybe she's being self-deprecating. Verse 14, the whole verse is different, but let's break it down. It says, "Now it is time to eat." Beautiful words that anybody likes hearing. Boaz saying, "It's time to eat. Let's go eat." Versus, "At mealtime, when it's mealtime, come here." And then it says here, Boaz handed her meal. Versus he reached or he grabbed for her parched corn. So we can see one's a little more appetizing. Here's your meal, served on a platter perhaps. In the Masoretic, here's your dried corn. Not as appetizing. Doesn't even sound like it's been prepared for consumption. Verse 15, there's a footnote here regarding reproach her not. The term in the Greek is shame her not. So it's one thing to correct her. It's another thing to shame her. So it's a lot more, you can see that there's more of a seriousness. Not that reproaching someone isn't serious, but in terms of an honor-shame society, don't shame her. Okay. Verse 16, a significant difference as well. There's an omission. It says here, "And do you," it says Boaz instructing his young men, "Do you," or you do this, by all means, do this. Carry it for her, the sheaves, whatever she's collecting, because she's gleaning. Carry it for her. So we can see how he's very considerate of Ruth's body in terms of her hurting herself by lifting all that weight. "And you shall surely let fall for her some of that which is heaped up." Okay, so that has been omitted, all of that. And then it says, "And let her eat." That's omitted as well. So again, he's very considerate towards her well-being. Verses, "And let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her." and leave them, that she may glean them. So again, very considerate. Verse 19, it says, "Where have you gleaned today?" The question of Naomi, and she answers where. She told her where she had worked versus whom she had worked for. So the question in both translations is where, not whom. So you can see where and then where. So she does answer in the Septuagint, follows in line with the questioning. Her answer is where she worked. And then she adds a extra detail, but in the Masoretic, she's describing who she worked for right away, not addressing where she worked, not answering her question, basically. Verse 20, because he has not failed in his mercy, versus who has not left off his kindness. So in the Septuagint, Adonai is trustworthy. He has not forsaken us, essentially, versus he spared some kindness. He had some extra and he spared some. So it can be taken that way. Describing Boaz, Naomi is describing him, saying that he is near akin to us. He is one of our relations. So he's one of our family, essentially. He's family versus he is one of our next kinsmen. And that means the same thing, but in our modern society, we don't use these terms too often. Nearest of kin is probably that's how it's worded. But kinsman, the biblical term kinsman, it does sound more like a title, or sounds like an official of government, to be honest. But she's just being frank in the being more blunt in the Septuagint. He's our family. He's one of our relatives. Another big difference in this chapter in verse 21, and let's read it in full. Ruth said to her mother-in-law, yes, he also said to me, keep close to my damsels. Okay, stay close by my young women until the men shall have finished all my reaping. So it's important to notice this difference. Not only did Boaz instruct her, Ruth, to keep close to his young women, in the Masoretic, it doesn't say that. This is what he tells her, according to Ruth's account. It says here, you shall keep fast. So stay close by who? My young women? No, my young men. That's a dangerous situation. She shouldn't be put in that situation. I think there's a contradiction, clearly, because Boaz says he instructed his young men not to touch her and so on. So by putting her in that area of young men, being in their company, that is a risk of her being touched by them, especially the young men who are not married. Okay, until they have ended all my harvest. Okay, so notice harvest versus reaping. The reason I point this out is because this is important to set straight. I want to set the record straight here. In terms of Boaz's farm or harvesting operation here, the men, notice what work they're doing, the reaping. Reaping is literally cutting. Okay, they're doing the cutting, they're doing the hard part of the job, the harder part of the job. And what are the women doing? They're not doing the reaping, they're doing the gleaning, which is the gathering. They're only picking up what the men have cut down. They're collecting it. The men are doing the harder part of the work. That's why Ruth could go from morning till evening without so much as a little break, because she's doing the easier part of the work. Not saying that it's completely easy. It still requires her to walk, to lift, to follow the reapers, but she's not doing the cutting. Okay, so it's not reasonable for her to be. I know a lot of people, even myself, I imagined Ruth as this, burly, tough woman with a big scythe cutting all down the field by herself. And that's just not the case. She's not cutting at all, not doing any cutting. She's doing the reaping, or the gleaning rather. Verse 22, and this verse confirms the previous one. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "Well, it is well, daughter, that you went out with his damsels, or maidens. Thus they shall not meet you in another field." So we can see in both of them, you go out with his damsels or maidens. This is a contradiction of verse 21 in the Masoretic, because she's saying that Boaz told her, "Stay close by my young men, not my young women." And then she just contradicts what she said. Naomi does, saying, "Oh, okay, it's good that you go out with his young men." No, maidens. Complete contradiction. Okay? And the word they shall not meet you. It's hard to really know who is being referred to here, but in my opinion anyway, this could be referring to the men who are doing the reaping and who are not married either. Okay, that's just my speculation. Verse 23, the Masoretic again contradicts itself in verse 21, talking about the young men and the harvest. It says here, "So she kept fast by the young men," no, the maidens of Boaz, to do what? To glean until the end of the barley harvest and of wheat harvest, okay, and so on. So that's all for this chapter. Just wanted to point out those differences, and I think they're substantial enough to really make us second guess the veracity, the truthfulness of the Masoretic text. So I thank you for your time once again, ladies and gentlemen. Till next time, we'll look at Ruth chapter 3. Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, and peace be unto you. Maranatha.